Imagine waking up on a Saturday morning. The news is supposed to be quiet. The stock market is closed. Diplomats are taking a break. It's a slow day. But then the reports start coming in. Something just happened in North Korea. And it wasn't the usual thing. 10 missiles were fired at once. Not one, not two, 10. All at the exact same time. They shot up into the sky and flew toward the Sea of Japan. The whole world saw the headline and called it a provocation. They said North Korea was showing off again. But what if they were looking in the wrong direction? What if those 10 missiles were never meant for Japan at all? What if they were a message meant for someone else? And what if that message was received loud and clear? Welcome to Currency Archives. If you are new here, you picked a big day to join us. Hit that subscribe button. It is like putting on your glasses before reading the fine print. You will want to see what is coming next clearly, and while you are at it, tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from today. Trust me, depending on where you live, this story hits very differently. Let's get into it. It started early. Before most people in the United States had even finished their first cup of coffee, North Korea made a choice, a very specific choice. They launched 10 ballistic missiles. That number 10 is not random. In the military world, volume is its own language. When you fire 10 missiles at once, you are not just checking if your equipment works. You are telling the world, look at what we can do. Look at our power. We can do this at scale. The officials in South Korea confirmed it fast. The missiles traveled about 350 kilometers. They climbed to an altitude of roughly 80 kilometers, and then they landed. They landed carefully, just outside of Japan's special economic zone, the area in the ocean where Japan has special rights. That part is very important. North Korea did not mess up. They did not miss their target by accident. Their navigation systems work fine. They put those missiles exactly where they wanted them, close enough to make Japan nervous, but far enough away that Japan couldn't legally call it a direct attack. It was a very sharp, very clean move. Now think about that height, 80 kilometers. Normal missiles usually go up much higher in a big arc. That high arc gives them a longer flight time, and a longer flight time gives defense systems like the ones the US and its allies use more time to see the missiles, track them, and shoot them down. But 80 kilometers is low. That is a flat, fast path. It cuts the time for the defense systems in half. It makes the missiles much harder to stop. North Korea knows this. They study our systems. They know how they work. That low altitude was not a mistake. It was a strategy. 10 missiles, flat path, right outside Japan's zone, on a Saturday. Every single part of that launch was chosen on purpose. And here is why the timing matters even more. This did not happen in a quiet week. It happened while the United States and South Korea were running their big joint military drills. These are huge practice runs with thousands of troops and warplanes. North Korea has always hated these drills. They say it's practice for an invasion. So while those drills were happening, North Korea fired 10 missiles. That is not a coincidence. That is a direct answer. It is their way of saying, we see you. We are ready. You don't scare us. South Korea responded right away. They said it was a clear violation of international rules. They ordered their forces to be on higher alert. The words were strong. But here is the quiet truth that no one wants to say out loud. North Korea has broken these rules many times before, and nothing ever really happens. There are meetings, there are sanctions, there are statements, but the launches keep coming, and each time the missiles fly a little farther and send a message a little louder. What happened on that Saturday was not just an angry move from a crazy regime. It was a demonstration. It was a show of force, carefully planned and perfectly timed. It was meant to say one thing above all else. North Korea is no longer just testing if it can do this. It is showing the world that it will keep doing it. There is something very serious about a government that does what it says it will do. For a long time, the world has treated North Korea's threats like noise. They say scary things, everyone shrugs, and then nothing happens. But this time was different. This time, they warned everyone first. They used words like terrible consequences, not the usual political talk, real heavy words, and then, within the same news cycle, before the experts could even finish debating if the threat was real, 10 missiles were in the air. The warning was not noise. The warning was a schedule. That detail should worry people more than the missiles themselves, because a country that follows through on its threats, publicly and on its own time, is not acting out of desperation. Desperation is wild and unpredictable. Confidence is different. Confidence is dangerous. It means the next warning should be taken seriously. It means the words and the actions are now the same thing. Go back a step. Before the missiles, North Korea was watching those US-South Korea military drills get bigger and bigger. From their point of view, and you don't have to agree with them to understand it, these are not practice drills. They are rehearsal for an invasion. They have said this for years. But this time, they stopped talking and started acting. The drills started. The warnings came. The world ignored them. And then North Korea did something that most governments, even tough ones, rarely do with such precision. They delivered exactly what they promised. 10 missiles. No more, no less. Now look at the United Nations. South Korea says the launch breaks the rules. Legally, that is true. North Korea is banned from doing this. But here is the math problem. They have broken the rules many times before, and the group that is supposed to enforce the rules, the Security Council, is stuck. Some countries, like China and Russia, stop any real punishment from happening. The rules pile up, the violations pile up, and North Korea sees this clearly. They are not scared of the rules. They are counting on the fact that the rules have no power. South Korea ordering its troops to be ready says more about the real danger than any political speech ever could. Governments do not raise their alert level for small things. They do it when the threat has changed, when the pattern is different, and the pattern is different. North Korea is no longer in a cycle of act and retreat. It is in a cycle of warn and deliver. That changes everything for every government, every military planner, and every business owner watching from the outside. Because the next time North Korea warns the world, whatever they say, whatever time they give, no one can just call it a show anymore. The missiles landed in the water, but they were never meant for the water. That is the part that most news reports missed. Every channel talked about the flight path. They showed maps, they gave the numbers. They looked exactly where North Korea wanted them to look, because Japan was never the real audience. Think about it. If North Korea wanted to threaten Japan, if Tokyo was the real target, the missiles would have acted differently. They would have flown higher. They would have landed closer. They would have landed inside Japan's zone to cause the most fear. But they didn't. They landed just outside. That was not a threat to Japan. It was a show staged near Japan for an audience watching from somewhere else. That audience was 3 different countries: Washington, Seoul, Beijing. Each one got a different message from those same 10 missiles. And understanding what each one heard is the only way to understand what North Korea really did. Washington heard this: your military drills have a cost. Every time you practice war on our border, we will respond. We are not scared of your planes or your ships or your politics. We have 10 missiles ready right now, and we just proved it. Seoul heard something different. They heard, your alert status and your angry words mean nothing. We just put 10 missiles in the water between us and Japan whenever we wanted. Your defense system was watching every single one. How safe do you feel right now? And Beijing, the most important listener of all, heard something quieter but much smarter. They heard, we are still here. We are still strong. We are still a factor you cannot ignore. Do not think international pressure is making us weak. We just showed you otherwise. 3 audiences, 3 messages, 1 launch. This is the smart part that gets lost when the news just calls it a provocation. Now think about the math problem this created for every defense expert in the region. The US and South Korea have amazing defense systems, but they are built on certain ideas about how many missiles might come at once. Every defense system has a limit. There is a point where too many things come too fast and the system gets overwhelmed. 10 missiles at once is not a random number. It is a number chosen to test that limit. It forces the people inside those defense centers to ask a question they don't want to answer. What happens if there are 20? What happens if there are 30? At what number do we start missing? North Korea just ran that test for them in real life. And the data from that test, the radar signals, the flight patterns, the reaction times of South Korean and Japanese systems, that data all goes back to North Korea's planning rooms. Every launch is also a spy mission. Every show of force is also a way to collect information. The world was watching the missiles fly. North Korea was watching the world react. This is smart fighting at its best. A country with much less money than its enemies uses one single event to send political messages to 3 capitals, test the best defense systems in the region, collect live intelligence on how those systems react, and show they can do big things all at once. 10 missiles, 4 results. No mistakes. The water was just the background. The real targets were never in the ocean. And somewhere in Washington, Seoul, and Beijing, in rooms that will never be on TV, serious people are now thinking about very serious questions. Because 10 missiles today leaves one big question for tomorrow. What does that number become next time? The missiles are gone now. They are in the ocean. They are in the reports. They are in the news clips. The physical part lasted a few minutes. The news coverage lasted a day. And then, like always, the world moved on. But the economic wave does not move on. It moves quietly. It moves through markets, through shipping routes, through insurance costs, through the meeting rooms of companies that never get mentioned in missile news, but whose money feels every single rise in tension. And Saturday's launch sent a wave that smart business people cannot ignore. Start with defense companies. That is where the money moves first and fastest. Every time North Korea does a big launch, defense stocks in South Korea, Japan, and the United States go up. Not because war is starting tomorrow, but because big investors know something that normal people miss. More tension means more military shopping. When a government raises its alert level, that order eventually becomes a budget. That budget becomes a contract. That contract becomes money for the companies that build the missiles and the radar and the computers. Saturday's 10 missiles just made those contracts more urgent. But defense is just the start. Below it is something much bigger for the world economy. Look at South Korea's place in the world. This is not a small country on the edge. South Korea makes the most advanced computer chips in the world. It makes a huge part of the world's memory chips. Its ships carry goods that feed supply chains in every major economy. When people get nervous about the Korean peninsula, even for a day, even without any actual fighting, the companies that depend on South Korea start asking quiet questions. What is our backup plan? If this gets worse, how much will we lose? How fast can we find new suppliers? Those questions don't make headlines, but they drive decisions. And those decisions, made in risk departments today, reshape supply chains for the next 1 to 3 years. Saturday's launch just sped up conversations that were already happening. Now look at Japan. Japan's public response was calm. But behind the calm words, Japan's shipping insurance companies and risk calculators were already updating their numbers. The Sea of Japan is not just a name on a map for Japanese businesses. It is a highway for their products. When that highway gets connected to missile launches, even if the missiles land safely outside the zone, the risk cost of using that highway goes up. Higher risk means higher shipping costs. Higher costs mean tighter profits for exporters. Tighter profits mean pressure on prices, and that pressure eventually lands on the stuff you buy at the store. This is how a missile fired on a Saturday morning in North Korea ends up in a business report being read in an office in Chicago 2 weeks later. And then there is the pattern that smart money has learned to watch. Every time things get tense on the Korean peninsula, every time a launch is bigger than normal, every time the words get sharper, there is a quiet but real movement of money away from the region. It is not panic. It is not a crash. It is something more careful. It is professional money quietly saying, I don't want to be here right now. South Korean stocks, Japanese bonds, the value of the local money, all of these things carry a risk tag that changes instantly when events like Saturday happen. And the change is never just about the military, it is always about the money, because markets don't wait for war to start before they start counting the cost. And here is the final truth that this story demands. The missiles landed in the sea, but the economic results land everywhere else. In the company calls where bosses quietly admit they are reviewing their supply plans. In the shipping insurance papers where risk categories get quietly moved up. In the big investment funds where regional money gets slowly moved out. In the government budgets where defense spending gets bigger. North Korea fired 10 missiles on a Saturday. The sea took the hit. The world economy is still counting the cost. And the scariest part of this whole story is not what happened on Saturday. It is the quiet fact now proven beyond any doubt. When North Korea gives its next warning, it won't be a warning at all. It will be a schedule.